The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, The Free Soul, lecture delivered by Swamiji in New York in 1896. The analysis of the Sankhya stops with the duality of existence, nature and souls. There are an infinite number of souls which, being simple, cannot die and must therefore be separate from nature. Nature in itself changes and manifests all these phenomena. And the soul, according to the Sankhya, is inactive. It is a simple by itself, and nature works out all these phenomena for the liberation of the soul. And liberation consists in the soul discriminating that it is not nature. At the same time, we have seen that the Sankhya were bound to admit that every soul was omnipresent. Being a simple, the soul cannot be limited because all limitation comes either through time, space, or causation. The soul, being entirely beyond these, cannot have any limitation. To have limitation, one must be in space, which means the body, and that which is the body must be in nature. If the soul had form, it would be identified with nature. Therefore, the soul is formless. And that which is formless cannot be said to exist here, there, or anywhere. It must be omnipresent. Beyond this, Sankhya philosophy does not go. The first argument of the Vedantists against this is that this analysis is not a perfect one. If their nature be absolute and the souls also be absolute, there will be two absolutes, and all the arguments that apply in the case of the soul to show that it is omnipresent will apply in the case of nature. And nature too will be beyond all time, space, and causation. And as a result, there will be no change or manifestation. Then will come the difficulty of having two absolutes, which is impossible. What is the solution of the Vedantist? His solution is that just as the Sankhya say, it requires some sentient being as the motive power behind, which makes the mind think and nature work, because nature in all its modifications from gross matter up to Mahat intelligence is simply insentient. Now, says the Vedantist, this sentient being which is behind the whole universe is what we call God, and consequently this universe is not different from him. It is he himself who has become this universe. He not only is the instrumental cause of this universe, but also the material cause. Cause is never different from effect. The effect is but the cause reproduced in another form. We see that every day. So this being is the cause of nature. All the forms and phases of Vedanta, either dualistic or qualified monoistic or monoistic, first take this position that God is not only the instrumental but also the material cause of this universe, that everything which exists is He. The second step in Vedanta is that these souls are also a part of God, one spark of that infinite fire. As from the mass of fire millions of small particles fly, even so from this ancient one have come all these souls. So far so good. But it does not yet satisfy. What is meant by a part of the infinite? The infinite is indivisible. So there cannot be parts of the infinite. The absolute cannot be divided. What is meant therefore by saying that all these sparks are from Him? The Advaitist, the non-dualistic Vedantist solve the problem by maintaining that there really is no part and that each soul is really not a part of the infinite but actually is the infinite Brahman. Then how can there be so many? The sun, reflected from millions of globules of water, appears to be millions of suns, and in each globule is a miniature picture of the sun form. So also all these souls are but reflections but not real. They are not real I, which is the God of this universe, the one undivided being of the universe. And all these little different beings, men and animals, etc., are but reflections and not real. They are simply illusory reflections upon nature. There is one infinite being in this universe, and that being appears as you and as I. But this appearance of divisions is, after all, a delusion. He has not been divided, but only appears to be divided. This apparent division is caused by looking at Him through the network of time, space, and causation. When I look at God through the network of time, space, and causation, I see Him as the material world. But when I look at Him from a little higher plane, yet through the same network, I see Him as an animal, a little higher as a man, a little higher as a God, but yet He is the one infinite being of the universe, and that being we are. I am that and you are that, not parts of it, but the whole of it. It is the eternal knower standing behind the whole phenomena. He Himself is the phenomena. He is both the subject and the object. He is the I and the you. How is this? How to know the knower? The knower cannot know himself. I see everything but cannot see myself. The self, the knower, the Lord of all, the real being, is the cause of all the vision that is in the universe. But is it impossible for him to see himself or to know himself excepting through reflection? You cannot see your own face except in a mirror, and so the self cannot see its own nature until it is reflected, and this whole universe therefore is the self trying to realize itself. This reflection is thrown back first from the protoplasm, then from the plants and the animals, and so on and on from better and better reflectors, until the best reflector, the perfect man, is reached. Just as a man who, wanting to see his face, looks first in a little pool of muddy water and sees just an outline, then he comes to a clear water and sees a better image, then to a piece of shining metal and sees a still better image, and at last to a looking glass and sees himself reflected as he is. Therefore, the perfect man is the highest reflection of that being who is both subject and object. You now find why man instinctively worships everything and how perfect men are instinctively worshipped as God in every country. You may talk as you like, but it is they who are bound to be worshipped. That is why men worship incarnations such as Christ or Buddha. They are the most perfect manifestations of the eternal self. They are much higher than all the conceptions of God that you and I can make. A perfect man is much higher than such conceptions. In him, the circle becomes complete. The subject and the object become one. In him, all delusions go away in their place. Comes realization that he has always been that perfect being. How come this bondage then? How was it possible from this perfect being to degenerate into the imperfect? How was it possible that the free became bound but was always free? Various clouds of various colors before the sky. They remain there a minute and then pass away. It is the same eternal blue sky stretching there forever. The sky never changes. It is the cloud that is changing. So, you are always perfect, eternally perfect. Nothing ever changes your nature or ever will. All these ideas that I am imperfect, I am a man or a woman or a sinner, or I am the mind, I have thought, I will think, all are hallucinations. You never think, you never had a body, you never were imperfect. You are the blessed Lord of this universe, the almighty ruler of everything that is and ever will be. The one mighty ruler of these suns and stars and moons and earths and planets and all the little bits of our universe. It is through you that the sun shines and the stars shed their luster and the earth becomes beautiful. It is through your blessedness that they all love and are attracted to each other. You are in all, and you are all. Whom to avoid and whom to take. You are all in all. When this knowledge comes, delusion immediately vanishes.